How's it going, everybody? It's Robert and Austin with Gas Money, back with another Gas Money Mentions episode. This week, we're interviewing Taylor Preston, who is the co-founder and CEO of LABR. Funny enough, LABR is similar to Gas Money, where they are a company that connects local businesses with local workers on demand. So, Taylor, thank you for hopping on the call today. We're going to be doing the virtual podcast, and if you want, just go ahead and give a brief introduction about yourself, and then introduce LABR to everybody.
Robert and Austin, appreciate you guys having me. Taylor Preston, CEO and co-founder of LABR. Prior to LABR, I was in banking at Ally Financial over in Detroit, and then got involved in M&A for a couple of years in the auto finance space. And one day I figured it's time to try out my efforts in entrepreneurship before I had obligations with the family and all that fun stuff. So my buddy from high school came up with the idea, and I launched LABR back in 2021, and we've been at it ever since.
Awesome. And I think you've already mentioned this to us, but what exactly was your buddy's business model back then? And then how did you transform that into what LABR is today?
Yeah, so his name's Christian, and he was running a landscaping company at the time. All of us, when we were in college, would work for him. And then we moved on to more of our career type jobs, moved out of the city, and he couldn't get workers. That actually coincided with when Uber came out for rides, and he started out of pure necessity running his business through a similar model where he had 10 or 15 workers, but every day he'd need a different amount on his crews. So every Sunday he'd shoot out a text to a text thread saying, hey, here's how many people I need by day. First come, first serve. They'd say, yep, I'll work for you Tuesday, Thursday. And then that's kind of how he ran his business for a couple of years before he was able to convince me that we need to start this thing.
Yeah, awesome. And like you mentioned too, he wasn't able to get workers, and then he went off of Uber. It's really funny too how all the similarities are kind of coming together. But we, studied Uber and DoorDash and all those different gig economy or tech gig companies. And we were like, that's kind of what we need to focus on to be able to first start with the paper model, like we were just talking about before we hopped on the podcast, with the paper invoices and the software that we can have the contractors on one side and the client or the jobs being sent out on the other, and being the middleman. So how, I guess, then was that transformed from the text thread into, the software? Because I think we're both on the same side where we didn't come from, know how to code or anything like that. So how'd you guys get into that?
Yeah, great question. So I think one thing, I call him Mullet Man. Like, now mullets are cool, but he's been rocking it since like 2010. So he was an early adopter of the mullet, and he didn't have tech experience. I didn't have tech experience, but there's a few things that have been true about why he wanted to do this. One, on the client side, he always says there's chores around every job site. He's like, these are things that you can train a responsible person to do in 10 minutes or less. And there's so many people that can do it. So he was in tune with what the clients needed. And then he was really in tune with what the workers wanted. There's the next generation, I'm a millennial, that included, a lot of people want flexibility in their shifts. So he was very in tune with not only what the clients need, but what the workers wanted. So that was one big thing as we were thinking about launching this that was important. And then on the tech side, I just by chance moved to a company and oversaw an operation that was building an app for shipping cars. So you could basically go in, say, I want to ship a car from Michigan to Florida. It would send out a estimate to the client. And then if they accepted the estimate, it'd come back to our app, and then it blasts out to all of our carriers. It was a 3PL. And then it would geo-track the shipping, and it would do estimated delivery times and all that fun stuff. So I always say I thought tech development was so hard, and I'm sure the coding is, but the business people just need to be able to define what the app needs to do. Then the smart people figure it out. So through managing that project and a few others with that company, I called them. It was actually 2019. I was living in Sacramento, California at the time. I was back in Grand Rapids for Thanksgiving. I look at them. I was like, hey, man, we can pull this off now. Like, the smart people, you can find smart people to do the coding. We just need to be very succinct in what we want. And so that's kind of how it all started. And I used to think it was so daunting, and it still is, the whole technology development side, but or software development side. But there's a lot of people with that skill set, and really what it comes down to is being able to clearly define what you want from the business side, what the app needs to do. And there's plenty of people that can figure that out. And we found a great partner that helped us get that going.
That's awesome too, because without having tech experience, just like Austin and I, it can be pretty intimidating, especially when you're talking with your buddy, just like we did. Hey man, let's make an app like Uber to connect workers with, in our case, homeowners, in your case, businesses. But then you think, like you mentioned, I don't have tech experience. How the heck am I going to get this thing built? And we wanted to take that same route that you did, where you always want to hire somebody who's smarter than you in a field that's that specific. And the biggest thing that comes with that, especially in the world of tech, is finances. Like tech development is very expensive, and that's something that we learned very soon into our process of building the app. So I guess our question to you is, how did you figure out the funding for that initial launch of the MVP?
Yeah, well, and you're spot on about the people smarter than you. And I think that was the big aha for us when we got this thing rolling, was after, I didn't even realize it at the time till I came back here and I was talking with him and I was like, wait, our division just got an app published in the App Store. I know how to do this now, not the coding side, but it was kind of the light bulb of, holy shit, we could do it. So I told him, and then we started to figure out some of the numbers and who would be a good partner. We were very fortunate. We brought on a third co-founder named Kyle, and he worked for a staffing company called Kelly Services. And he was the VP of technology there, and they redid their whole operating infrastructure. So this will come back to the funding, but he was able to architect the whole system, say, hey, here's exactly what we need from each feature set. And that really accelerated both our time to market and also lowered our expenses. So we paid Kyle in equity. We're all in the trenches doing it together, but he gave us a couple of year head start so that we had a much lower software development cost. Not that it's ever cheap, but it's a lot cheaper than it could have been. So that was a big piece for us. And then on the funding, I with the early co-founders, we did the MVP. I got some strong encouragement from a board member and mentor of mine. Her name's Tommy White. She actually put me in touch with Kyle. She goes, the front end, you can always change. You got to get the back end right. And if you're not willing to get the back end right, then don't even do the project at all. So we put a lot of the initial investment into the back end. The front end was clunky. We ran into it was just, if you put our app next to any app that you're on every day, they're like, oh, did you do this with, paper and crayon? Like, that's how far behind it was. But we had a really solid infrastructure. So we just continued to iterate off of that. I was fortunate enough to have some early success in my corporate career that I was able to fund, not an app, but an early stage MVP. So that's how we got rolling. And that went into a proof of concept in 2021 between June and August, where we were all kind of surprised. We had 19 clients, 50 workers. Everybody was coming back to take more jobs. Everybody was coming back to post more jobs. Looking back, we got a little lucky with COVID and the worker shortage, but I'll take whatever I can get. So at that time, we had not only a functioning app, which is a good starting point for fundraising, but also we had some material revenue. It was early, but material enough. It was repeat clients. So we were able to reach out to some local business owners and just our own network to at least start the conversations. And it's kind of like an interview, right? Like, the first one's pretty rough. The second one gets a little bit better. It's kind of all about reps. Then we got really fortunate just to meet a lot of cool, largely entrepreneurs that want to help the next generation of entrepreneurs. And so we collected angel checks really throughout end of Q4 2021 all the way throughout 2022. So that's kind of how we got started on the fundraising piece.
Okay. And you mentioned too, like, you guys kind of right out of the gate, 50 workers, 19 clients, which is huge. That's an amazing start. Quick way to find your proof of concept there. And we had a similar way of doing that, but we were doing the jobs. We started this in high school, basically just Rob and I. And so we were doing the jobs mainly, but it was kind of like a out of the gate quick start, but it was the phones. It was people calling, all the clients coming in. Then it was finding the workers. That was our hardest part. But wrapping that back in at the very beginning, did you ever have to jump in and fill a job and do any work like on the platform?
Yeah, so twofold to what you just said. One of the things I kick myself to this day, the app took a full year to build, and I look back and I'm like, for the first like 5 clients, we didn't need an app. It could have been an Excel spreadsheet, but I was so hung up on, we need an app to pull this off. And now I look back, I should have done exactly what you did. Not that it would have been material or been able to scale, but you could have got some money in the door and learned a lot along the way. So that was one of our many mistakes we made along the way. But now I look back and I was waiting for perfection, and it just wasn't necessary. So working the jobs, I did work a few that first summer. We got really fortunate. Christian was super helpful, not only in the fact that he came up with this whole concept and realized that we needed to build out a really strong team to get this thing going, but he had his own business. So how he runs it is part labor to staff up and down, and then he usually keeps 3 to 4 employees on full time. So he was able to, when we get jobs, I could call him and say, hey man, we got a job. Do you have anybody that can fill it? And then he could sometimes send his other guys out. He would work jobs. And then where we got really lucky is his little brother was a freshman in college or right out of high school. I can't remember which one. So we just went crazy on recruiting his brother's buddies, and they all ended up liking it because they get to pick their shifts. They get paid quickly. They get paid fairly. So it was kind of the perfect storm. But we were able to get a lot of workers really quick. And I think part of it's luck, but Isaiah, his little brother, was able to just get all his buddies signed up. And that's kind of how we launched.
Yeah, and it sounds like word of mouth was a huge factor in that. And that's what we found when we first started. For us, it was more on the client side. Since you work with businesses, I feel like businesses network pretty easily, especially in the landscape handyman industry, which is kind of our main gig. But also for us, we had clients, there would be neighbors. Since we're working with homeowners, they'd be like, hey, you want to use gas money? Yeah, go check them out. And then that's kind of how we started out. And we were going to ask you too, for getting those new workers. When we started, it was mostly just word of mouth. Did you do any paid advertising, any campaigns on social media, or did you start mostly with that word of mouth aspect?
So coming from the auto finance industry, it's a huge industry, but it's very much who knows who. So digital marketing, I'm far from an expert on digital marketing. I had no idea about any of it. So like, if you would have asked me in 2021 if I was going to do a paid digital marketing campaign, I would have looked at you like you had a third eye. I had no idea what was going on. So looking back, I wish I would have known that, because that would have been a lot quicker to ramp up, but we didn't know anything about that. So it was more, when we get a good worker, we'd start a referral bonus. Like, hey, Robert, if you did a great job, if you have any buddies that sign up for the app, I'll pay you $25 after they work their first job. So that was a big thing for us too. It's like, refer your friends, we'll pay you. We all win out of the end. So that was a big piece of it too. And then also I was pretty aggressive with saying, hey, Robert, I need your friends' contacts, and I'll spiff you if you help me get these jobs filled. Like, we have 10 jobs open tomorrow, and we've got 2 workers. So we had to get creative and incentivize people to get their buddies. Greek life was great for us. You get one person in a fraternity, they're a great worker. They go tell all their buddies, and overnight you got 20 workers ready to roll. So that was a good piece to it in the early days as well.
Yeah, and then to go off of that, go ahead. Were you gonna?
Yeah, I was just going to say real quick. So our niche with gas money, obviously, like all of our workers, we focus on that 16 to 24-year-old range. So targeting like high school and college students who are just trying to earn extra gas money, hence the name gas money. And for you, I know you were mentioning fraternities are a huge source of recruitment for workers. Have you found certain balance between having young adults work and then having older, more experienced landscapers, or does it lean one way or the other with your workers?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. We thought at the very beginning it was going to be all college students. Then we thought it was going to be all college and trade school. Now I'd say we're probably a third college and trade school, and the rest are people that either can't hold down a traditional 40-hour week job for whether they have childcare or other issues in their life, or they can't have a traditional schedule. So it's probably 60%, 70% people that just want to work this way, whether it's picking up an extra shift, whether it is they just want to be able to work their 25 hours a week. So we actually really got into a whole different group of workers than I first expected. And I'll always remember this. So I use them around my house all the time when I get yelled at for the weeds being too high or whatever the case is. And nobody knows who I am. So I would have them here and ask how they learned about labor and what's going well. What do they like? What do they not like? And I remember when gas prices skyrocketed a few years ago, Uber and Lyft gave them a spiff, but it wasn't anything meaningful. And somehow a bunch of drivers found our app. and they like the consistency. They like that they had an hourly rate and estimate of how much money they were going to make. I don't know how they found it, but we picked up a ton of workers off of that. And then there are different challenges with college students versus people that can work 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours. Like college students, one of the challenges we ran into was if a client wanted an 8-hour shift, a college student would call us and say like, hey, I can work the first 6 hours that I got to go to class. And some of the clients weren't open to that, whether they're all riding to a job site together or they just want them clocking in and out with their other staff working it. So there were some unforeseen challenges with college students. And then summers were great for college students. They just want to make as much money as they can, work as many hours as they can, take a Friday off, whatever the case is. But once school came back that first summer, we got not hosed, like we all knew it was coming, but it was like begging people to go out to work. They're like, I can't work. I've got class. And so that created a whole different challenge than we kind of anticipated because we didn't have the flexibility on the client side to be able to say, hey, Austin can work these 4 hours. Is that all right with you? Because a lot of times they said, no, that's not all right. So we had some unforeseen challenges with college students, and it's still a great source of worker for us. They just have some scheduling issues that other adults don't have.
Yeah, we definitely have come across that because that's kind of our main thing. That's what, at least that's where it's started and it's going so far with the high school and college students. But with the other people signing up that, like you said, don't have a normal job or have a normal job, but it's only part-time, and then they can work as many hours as they possibly want. They don't have school or anything like that to worry about. That's a huge thing that we've been struggling with, I guess, at this point, because now we're back, everybody's back in school, and we're kind of in that same phase with not begging, but really trying to make sure that they know they can make good money. So here are the jobs. They're right here.
Just I bet you're in this
that.
too. Yeah, I bet you're in this too. I remember it's like halfway through first semester where everybody runs out of beer money or gas money, and they're like, "Yeah, start picking up shifts," because they ran out of their summer money. The other thing, I'll never forget this. We had a guy, and he's awesome. His name's Reed. He was one of our first workers. He was awesome for us. And then I had him working the Friday after Halloween. Reed, if you ever hear this, I swear I appreciate everything you did, but this is a funny story. So I texted him. Halloween was on a Thursday, and we had a big client that wanted a bunch of workers the next day. It was at like 8 a.m. or something. And I was like, hey, Reed, can you work this job tomorrow? And he goes, yeah, man, I'm in. I'll bring some buddies. Sure enough, I don't know what happens at the Halloween party, but they were feeling a little rough the next morning, and I get calls at like 11 a.m. like, oh, I'm so sorry I missed. So that was isolated to Halloween, but that's another issue with some fun stuff going on campus, that the reliability the day after goes down a little bit.
Yeah, especially with, and I guess you can also explain like how labor works, because that's, you were saying it's basically scheduled out. You're working with a business, they need X amount of people to work, and then you try to get the jobs, but that day and time is already there. So I guess, working with that, how did you pivot when you were mainly, the college spot, or did you just reach out to other people that you knew could work or maybe had some more flexibility?
Yeah, so really that was Q4 of 2021 when all that stuff happened. And that's as we were fundraising, building out a team, bringing out investors and all that stuff. So we basically took our foot off the gas because we had a lot to figure out. Like worker onboarding it worked, but it wasn't scalable. So we said, well, what do we want to do? We obviously want the revenue, but it's probably smarter for us to reset and basically service clients, let them know, hey, we're having these issues. January 1st, we're going to be up in business. So we kind of spent that Q4 rebuilding our infrastructure so it's scalable, so that on January 1st, 2022, wow, almost 2 years ago now, we were ready to roll and we didn't run into those same issues. Not that we didn't run into them again, because it was still primarily college students, but that's when we had to expand from just college students outside of that. So it was more of telling clients, hey, and just being super realistic with them, like, hey, we've got, you asked for 10 workers, we got 4 ready to roll. One has to leave at 2 p.m. The rest will be there all day. So I think just setting that expectation up front is how we tried to get around it. But that was a tough quarter for a lot of reasons. You're going through a lot of firsts as an organization. You're raising money. You're bringing on people. You're trying to keep clients happy. And what we really felt the right move was just being super honest with them about what was going on with us so that they knew how to plan their business around it. And just to put perspective, like we have a client, a landscaping client, and on the late shifts or leaving home early or going home before the shift's over, our rule is there's no minimum hours worked. If you accept a job, you're expected to show up on time and work the full shift, because we have like a landscaping client, and every morning they show up at the nursery, and then there's 20 crews that go out and they start mowing lawns or spreading mulch, whatever the case is. If we have somebody come in 2 hours late, they hold up a whole crew. We have somebody that needs to leave 2 hours early, the whole crew has to come back. So it's not that's an isolated landscaping type issue. But some of these jobs just don't have the flexibility to be able to allow the hey, I just want to work 3 or 4 hours here. And we were totally on board with the gig economy. Hey, work when you want. And that had some negative consequences too, because people thought, oh, it's gig. I can just show up when I want. I can leave when I want. We're like, well, we told our client that you're going to be there for 8 hours and you showed up for 3. Like, that's an issue. So we had a lot of bumps and bruises from kind of how we communicated that and setting the right expectations up front.
Yeah, and that's one thing that's tough with the gig economy is obviously like there's vetting processes, and you can talk to your workers as much as you can. You can try and give them advice and train them for how they need to act on the job, what they're going to be doing, the quality of work. But one thing Austin and I have found, especially with us doing the jobs mostly through high school, helping our friends learn how to mow lawns, how to do landscaping, is it's really hard to kind of recreate that passion that we have as startup owners, and kind of transmit that passion to workers who are really just focused on making money. And that's one thing that we've kind of struggled with a few times with new contractors that sign up is they'll go out to jobs, they'll either show up like a half hour to an hour late, maybe not even show up at all. And then some of them will sometimes do bad work, and that's just something that's expected in an industry like this. But for you, I mean, is there anything that you have in place to kind of motivate workers to do more quality? They're not only just earning money, but also like gaining new experiences, networking with other people, kind of adding that value proposition to the whole thing.
Yeah, we went through the same thing. And at the very beginning, we didn't even have an onboarding process. It was like, fill out your paperwork, sign up your bank account so we could pay you, and then go take jobs. And we had a ton of no-call, no-shows. Like, people would accept all these jobs. We'd be like, cool, this 20-person job is filled tomorrow, and like 2 show up. And you're like, well, that's a pretty big issue. So we had a lot of issues with that. We implemented a full onboarding process that basically all of our workers have to talk with our team before, make sure we set the right expectations, say, hey, we're so happy. It's a balance. You got to get them excited. I think there's a ton of value proposition with ours is the flexible schedule. I feel that we pay well. We pay the next day. So there's a lot of pros, but then you got to balance that with and by the way, because of the pros, we expect that you show up on time. If you're going to cancel, it has to be 48 hours in advance. We have to know about it. No cell phones, like the little things to make it a great service. So yeah, we probably in the early days churned through a lot of clients by not having that as structured as it should be.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned that balance too, because we both, and I'm sure you do this all the time, but you could talk all day about labor. We could talk all day about gas money and how awesome it is, like how cool of a service it is, and get the workers excited and even getting the clients excited about helping out the workers by getting them that temporary work. But finding that balance, that's what it really comes down to. And that's when you find your best workers too, when they're in compliance, when they understand, or you say something and they're like, yeah, I mean, they think it's an obvious, but at the end of the day, you can't just assume that they're going to think it's an obvious. So, this is an interesting story. We had one guy, he's actually still a good friend of ours. But it was one of those things, we didn't really have that process of explaining certain things. It was one of his first jobs. It was either me or Rob. It was lucky that we were on the job, and he gets to the job. It was a mowing or weed whacking job that we had to do like 3 hours of weed whacking with mowing like the side of a really steep hill. And so we just assumed that he was going to wear jeans and work boots and all that stuff, maybe gloves, bring some glasses. He showed up with, I think he had slides on. He forgot to, he didn't even have tennis shoes. and nothing else. That was it. We were lucky to have the equipment, but we were also lucky that his house was right around the corner, because there was no way that he was going to be able to actually do the job. So I'm sure you have stories for that stuff too.
Oh yeah, we have a lot of those, and we actually built in the app like acquired or required attire. Like, hey, you're expected to show up with this and the same thing. It's we've learned that we have to over communicate everything, and we've got everything from wrong attire to show up to people don't show up to the job, and you're like, hey, are you like on your way to the job site? And then they're like, oh no, I was just seeing how the app worked. It's like, oh cool, so we didn't fill that job because you're big. Like, we could have done that. It would have been nice to know. So yeah, we've got plenty of those stories too. And I'm curious on your guys' model, like that lawn mowing, do clients normally supply the equipment for you guys, or do your contractors end up bringing everything?
That's a great question. And since we hire them as contractors, I'm sure you're the same way. Like, we have to have them provide their own equipment. And on your side, is it the businesses that provide the equipment for them when they're hiring?
Yeah, so we don't have a lot that require a lot of equipment. So everybody has to provide reliable transportation, appropriate attire, gloves, safety glasses and stuff. But it's not like they're riding on lawnmowers and stuff like that, which is obviously a gray area in terms of labor law. So we haven't really run into that. Like, a lot of our stuff is I always say, if you could teach it in 10 minutes or less, we could do it.
Yeah, which is awesome. And we're focused a lot on that simplicity too. Like, most of our lawn care jobs are small, either mobile home lots or small neighborhood lots where you can do it with a push mower. And that's kind of how we started. So to answer your question first, we require the contractors to provide all their equipment. We don't have any inventory for equipment that we can use to provide contractors with. If we do collaborations, like Austin and I still do jobs in the summer. We're hoping to get away from that as we continue growing. But like in the summer, I think it was like maybe 2021, we had an extra lawnmower that we'd let our friend use to make money. And just kind of trying to help people get off the ground is our biggest thing. And how we started is we actually bought 2 used push mowers. I think they were like $40 each, and just started going around door knocking and stuff. And it was kind of that invest in not shitty equipment, but like bottom line equipment at minimum to get the job done, and then kind of grow your equipment from there as you can keep investing. And that's our goal with Gas Money now. Is we tell our contractors, like, if there's a job you need to use, for example, bush trimmer for, if your parents have a bush trimmer, first ask them if you could borrow it for a job. If you can't, maybe offer to pay them money to borrow it, to rent it. And it's all about like finding the most affordable ways to get started. And then once you start making money, we encourage investing into better equipment, sharpening your blades, stuff like that. Another thing we'd like to do as we kind of expand, since we're sticking with that contractor business model, is we think it'd be awesome to make the option for contractors, if they want to do lawn mowing, maybe have the ability to rent a lawnmower through the Gas Money app. So that way they can get their business started, maybe introduce like a payment plan or something, because having that equipment requirement is definitely a barrier for a lot of contractors who might want to earn money doing lawn care or landscaping, but might not have the resources to either afford or invest in that equipment. So that's something we've been kind of working on, just finding new avenues for contractors to have more access to equipment.
Yeah. You can almost partner with like an equipment leasing company or rental company.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. Like, most of the equipment we use is pretty small. I guess small is not the right word, like inexpensive in the grand scheme of things. Like, we don't have anybody using excavators or bulldozers or anything like that, mostly for liability. I'm sure that's a whole nother avenue we could go down, is liability. But
I'm sure all the listeners love talking about insurance and laws.
Oh my gosh, yeah, exactly. But I mean, even like a push mower, I mean, if you want a nice one, you got to spend at least like $250, $300. And for most contractors in high school, that's something they don't want to invest in. So
right, especially if you
we're trying to figure
jobs
out
there and how much money you're going to make and all that fun stuff.
Right.
Exactly.
And to add on to what to what you were saying, Rob, like the main thing that we preach, even in these podcasts, we do TikTok content, stuff like that. We're actually starting on the job vlogs on our YouTube. So like just to kind of show what it's like. And then, new contractors or even clients that see it, they can see that we're doing good work. And then the contractors, the main thing is like, it doesn't matter, exactly what the job is, because we only accept, or only clients are sending in, simple stuff. It depends on how much they're willing to ask, like pretty much anybody at their house has a garden rake or a shovel or a leaf rake. And it just goes up from there. And that's our main thing, because that's kind of how we started. And there's still a lot of contractors right now that just go in their garage or in their shed. And some of them ask their parents, but some don't. They just use it and make sure it's clean at the end of the day. And they, made a couple $100 just from stuff like that.
Yeah. You know what's interesting about the vlog posts, and I love that you guys are doing that. So my brother-in-law lives in California. He was out here for like a month during the summer, and he was just picking up labor jobs while he was out here to make some money while kind of on vacation. And I listened to him on his first job through the onboarding, because I kind of wanted to hear how it worked when you're a first-time worker. Like, I know my perspective of it, but I never heard it. That first job is scary. Like, we had one, it was taking down something at some music festival. And so he went through the whole onboarding process, and I was really impressed with our team. They did great. I didn't answer any of his questions because I wanted to kind of hear how it went. But he told me about his first job, and it never dawned on me. He's like, yeah, we showed up. It's this big field. There's like a mile of fence around there. I don't know who the supervisor is. I have his phone number. The service is spotty. And I'm like, that's intimidating. Like, you show up, you don't really know what you're doing. You never worked a job with labor. You don't know anybody around you. And I was like, holy crap, we got to figure out something for that to make it easier for them to take the first job. And that's probably the same with you and a lot of your contractors, is like, after they've worked 2 jobs, they got it down. It's easy. They know what to say. They know how to greet the clients, but they're probably like, shit, on my first job, what do I, that's kind of intimidating for both of our platforms.
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny you mentioned that, because when we started, we found the same thing. Like, we had already known how to do jobs because obviously we had the experience with it. But we'd get our friends to sign up, and it got to the point where we would make sure that the first job they picked up, we would be collaborating on them with. So that way it was not them just walking up to a random house, like having no idea how to start the job, what to talk to the client about. We'd actually, for each new contractor, we'd make sure one of us, either Austin or I, would go out to the job with them and do that a couple times until they were comfortable enough to do it on their own. Obviously, with scale, it's kind of hard to do that, and that's another thing I wanted to talk about too. So on our platform, we're more focused on high school, college aspects. So we allow collaboration on jobs, since it's a homeowner hiring contractors. So that's helped a lot with that onboarding process, where if there's a new contractor, they're not sure how to do a job, we're trying to kind of enforce that program a little more, where if you're a new contractor, you're intimidated by a job, you can go on with the more experienced contractor and almost set it up like a mentorship aspect. Whereas with yours, like, do you, when a new contractor signs up, do you recommend that they pick up a certain type of job, or is it pretty much they have the freedom to pick it up? And if they're connected with other labor contractors, do they get in like a group chat, or is it just everybody shows up at the job site and then goes from there?
Yeah, so a few things on that. One of the things that you hit on was the first time they show up to somebody's house to do a job, we started just telling the clients, because our clients are really cool and reasonable, and they understand we're a newish company. And so we'll say, hey, Robert, it's Austin's first job. He's coming out there. He's all fired up to work, but he's never done it before. We make sure somebody is there to kind of greet him. They're like, oh, absolutely. So that was one of the ways we got around that. And then in the job description, it used to be like landscaping work for Homegrown Landscaping, which is Christian's company. And then we found that once we over detailed the job postings, like, hey, you're going to be landscaping with Christian, you're going to be raking leaves into a tarp, taking the tarp to the street, people were much more likely to accept the jobs without anybody else, because they knew what they're getting into. It wasn't so gray. So that was big for us. And then I'm glad that you guys figured out the buddy system. We've talked a lot about it. We've never really put a system in place to make it happen. But we do find that, especially on the referral piece, like if Austin, you referred Robert, usually they'll text each other and be like, hey, this job has 4 openings, let's go take it together. So it kind of is the buddy system working itself out, but we don't have any formal program for it yet.
Yeah. And really our main thing, I mean, it's as simple as you can get, it's kind of even like that. Like our main focus is that they're working with either a friend or somebody that they, know in their area that's already done jobs on the Gas Money app. And, similar thing with labor, they're texting whoever. And like you said, with the college kids, they're going to text the other guys in their frat, hey, let's go make some money. And so they already know each other. One thing I guess that we put in place when they collaborate on a job, it sends that other contractor all the information, and then it opens up a text chat between them on the app so they can go back and forth and, figure everything out. If there's any questions before they even accept the job to collaborate with them, then they can figure it out, and they can even decline it. They can say, hey man, I'm busy that day, or there's no way I can do that. But yeah, that's been a huge thing. And even with our main focus with the content like that, the vlogs and, the TikToks and on the job stuff, it shows them if they're going to be able to see that, I guess, before signing up as a contractor. It can show them that, you can have fun with it. You can make good money. You don't have to have crazy experience. You don't have to have crazy tools, and kind of answering all of those underlying questions that I'm sure everyone has. Because like you were saying, you know how it is from your perspective, but sitting back and watching that onboarding process is huge. And that's what we've seen more and more, and getting that feedback from the new workers. That's a main point that we've seen, just asking them, like, there's jobs out there, why aren't you picking them up?
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of it's just there's not enough information. And I think a main thing that we have to do, this is just kind of thinking out loud about the functionality now, but is actually making the description for the client on their job request mandatory, because we were trying to figure out on how to get as many jobs out as quick as possible, making it, as simple as possible for a client to send out the job to the contractors. And we didn't make that mandatory because we thought, they're simple services. All they need is that heading. But when it really comes down to it, it makes you feel that much more comfortable when you know exactly what's going to be going on.
Yeah.
And with you guys, I think the exact time that you need to be there, and then the exact work that you're going to be doing, that's huge, I bet. Did you have anything before that? Like, was it even more simple than that, and then you guys added more description?
So the description and the additional fields has definitely come a long way. And then the other thing that I always laugh about, and it makes so much sense. So Christian, guy that came up with the idea for the app. So we have a lot of construction and landscaping. We have a lot of other industries too, but that's a big chunk of our work. And have you guys ever met somebody in construction that isn't crazy busy? Like these are the busiest people I've ever met. And I remember telling Christian one time the first year, because he started running his business through it during that pilot. And I called him because he's like, hey, man, can I get a couple workers tomorrow? And I'm like, dude, you own the company that owns the app. Just post a damn job. And then it dawned on me, like, these guys are busy. They're in their truck all day, every day. They have windshield time, but they can't go. And even if it only takes 60 seconds to post a job, they're literally hopping out of their truck to greet a client, greet a crew. Like, these people are busy. So then we started, we have the option that our team, our corporate team or whatever you want to call it, can post jobs. So a lot of people just like texting us like, hey, need 3 workers starting next week, Monday. Can you make it happen? Then we find their old job and we repost it. So like little things like that have gone a long way. And then we do have clients, a lot of clients that post their own jobs, and a lot of them it's a coaching thing. Like, the more specific you are, the better the results. But our team is monitoring it all day, every day, because if we get like, we one time had somebody post a job and it was like, it was a client that had been around for a long time, and they just put the client's name in the description. I was like, well, nobody's going to know what their client's name. So like they put their name is imported, then their client's name, and our workers have no idea what that is. So our team will go in and say, if we have the information, we'll make that description for them so that people can go see it. But that was definitely an issue in the early days of people not really knowing what they're walking into.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys were able to figure that out, because that's something that we wish we had, the actual ability from our admin dashboard to go in and add jobs, to kind of help facilitate things a little better. Because right now, when we want to hire a job, like if a client calls the phone, for example, wants their lawn mowed, we actually have our own client account that will go on to the app with, send out a job request, and then instead of having a client name, it just says gas money. And we actually had a contractor sign up a few months ago, and it was for a job that we posted through the gas money account. And he was kind of confused. He was like, well, yeah, so the client name for this was gas money, but I'm working on the gas money app. Like, am I speaking to a client when I'm doing messaging? Am I talking to you guys? So we had to get on the phone with him and kind of explain how all that works. Like, it's basically just us connecting a client that called over the phone. And it was just kind of confusing for that new contractor. So that's one thing we've been trying to figure out is, as much as the world's moving towards apps and kind of that digital world, there's still people out there that, like you said, just want to give labor a text, say, hey, I've got this job coming up. Can you guys find me some workers for it? Where they don't want to have to deal with the apps. Like, they don't have time for that. So I guess one more question for the app space. Like, have you had a lot of experiences with, for example, the very busy construction workers just not wanting to mess around with software at all and just wanting to do it over text?
Oh, 100%. That's probably in the construction and landscaping space. I would say 90% don't want to deal with it. They'll either email us, they'll call us, they'll text us. Like, don't bug me with that. Here's the work. Do you want it? Find it. I always joke around. Send it to me on carrier pigeon. I'll find a way to get it out on the app.
Exactly. But awesome. So, Austin, did you have anything else about the app? I kind of wanted to transition a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think we're definitely up to little ad break, and from here, I think we can transition into more of the business side of things. Definitely have a few
Awesome.
questions on that.
So here's an ad from our sponsor, and we'll be back in 30 seconds.
Are you looking to add some spice to your wardrobe? Do you enjoy spreading motivation and positivity? If so, Gas Money Gear has got you covered with a hot new line of merch centered around motivation and style. Our tees, hoodies, and apparel feature trendy designs with uplifting messages that inspire. Join us in our mission to support young adults and create positivity with apparel that excites. Plus, if you use the code INSIDE, you'll get 10% off your next purchase. To view our collection and elevate your wardrobe, visit www.gasmoneygear.com today.
All right, guys, back from our ad break and kind of transitioning from the platform side more into the actual business, nitty-gritty entrepreneurship stuff. I guess for a first question, I mean, you're a young dad. Congratulations, by the way. How old's your child right now?
Yeah, thank you. 14 months. Just
Okay,
a maniac.
yeah, so
Very mobile.
yeah, just starting out. So I guess one of the huge things that comes with entrepreneurship, which many entrepreneurs obviously have to experience, is there's a large risk in doing that. Like, you're out in Sacramento, California, you had a steady job, you were making money, and you had to get up and leave that job to take a risk that there's no guarantee of return, but as long as you believe in it, obviously it'll pay off in the long run. So I guess just walk us through that whole entire mentality of going through that journey, stopping your job, going full-time into labor. How does that feel, especially being a new parent?
Yeah, a lot to cover there. So my mentality was I'm an idea person, right? So I've got ideas for all these different businesses, and then it got to the point where it's like, I don't know how old I was, 27, and I had a couple good jobs at that time. I had a good network of people, great mentors, a lot of people I just met through the industry and otherwise, and I had a mentor that really pulled me through. Frankly, I shouldn't have been promoted like I was. I just got in with a mentor that I still keep in close contact. He's retired now, but he opened a lot of doors for me, and I jumped at every opportunity. It worked out well. So my philosophy was like, it's kind of now or when I'm 55. Like, you can't have a wife and kids and then just take a high risk effort to start a business. So my thought was, my quality of living never really changed with making more money, and I had saved up a good amount of money, and I was like, well, if there's time to do it, it's either now or at the tail end of my career after I have kids that are off to college and I'm an empty nester and hopefully have enough money to try it. So I was like, you know what, let's try it now. And I can always fall back on my experience, my resume, my contacts. And that holds true even more now when I look back. But I was just like, well, I would always say, I don't want to move into my parents' basement, but if I'm going to, now is better than when I have a kid. So we started the business. And I think one of the things I overlooked is how long it takes. Even if you're moving fast, like overnight success, I don't think happens unless you win a lottery ticket, which would be awesome, but I didn't get that fortunate. So we started the business. I wasn't married, got married, moved across the country, got a house. And then my wife ended up getting pregnant. And it was a very big blessing, but not at all what I kind of expected. Like pick 2 of the 4 of those, move and buy a house, start a business, get married, have a kid. 4 out of 4, you're insane and you shouldn't do what I did. It's just every single one of those is a lot of work, and it all worked out for us, thankfully, but it caused like everything. When I look back to where I expected to be after year 1, then year 2, then year 3, and fundraising and all that stuff, it's not good or bad. It just takes a lot more time than you expect. So I always encourage young entrepreneurs. It's like and I'm still in the thick of it, right? Like we still have a long way to go. I'm really pleased with our team and the success we've had, but we still have a long way to go. It's not an overnight thing. And I was like, cool, it's going to be like a year of like really grinding it out and not having a paycheck and all that stuff. Well, that year was actually more like 2 or 3. And we've been fortunate enough that we have some great partners on the fundraising side, and we have a phenomenal team on the labor side. But I grossly underestimated how long it would take, and I'm thankful I did it. Like I'm really excited with where we're at, where we're going. But yeah, man, it's been a grind.
Yeah, I'm sure. And even us, like I'm in my senior year of college down at Florida State in Austin. Is doing gas money full time by now. But even at 21 and 22 years old, like we feel like there's a lot of pressure to keep accelerating the business. It's like there's this huge stigma, and I'm sure you're familiar with it, where once you graduate high school, you go straight to college, you go straight into your career, and then for the next 30, 40 years of your life, like that's what your life is going to be. And Austin and I kind of had a same point of view on it, where if we're going to take a risk, we're going to kind of stray away from that status quo and do something that has no guarantee of success, but would be pretty damn fun to go for. And I'm sure we're going to learn a lot along the way. That was back when we were graduating high school, and we were like, hey man, let's go for it. Like if there's any time, it's now. So I think you kind of had that same thought process. And
there was a very specific time. So one of that company out of Sacramento had bought a bunch of other auto finance companies and what was called a roll up. So it was a bunch of similar companies. We bought them all. So we had a national footprint overnight. And I got to know a lot of the owners of the businesses that we bought. And I was like, I'm on the wrong side of this deal. Like, wait, so we work for a family fund. We bought all these companies, learned so much and met so many cool people through that. But then you have these business owners, they're in control of their schedule. They're in control of their whole life. Like they ended up reporting to people, obviously, because their companies got bought. But before that, they just built great businesses and would live off the cash flow. They saw the bigger vision that we were trying to accomplish. And I was like, I'm on the wrong end of this equation. Now, what they don't tell you publicly, I think everybody looks at the entrepreneurs that have made it and was like, oh man, they live a lavish life. Once you get to know these guys or girls, what the public doesn't see is their first 10, 15, 20 years of their kids not knowing if they're going to have food on the table and all this other stuff. Like it's not a sprint for them. And I think we're in an era where it's luckier that we have options for fundraising. Like a lot of these guys whose companies we bought, it was, we put the house on the line. I bought one truck. When that truck made enough money for us, we bought a second truck and we hired a different driver. So it was a longer time frame. But on one hand, you see all the success they had, how they're in control of their schedules. They're at their kids' sporting events. That's all awesome, but it's very easy to breeze over what it took them to get there. So that was kind of the realization. That goes back to, well, now's the time. I don't have a kid. I'm not married. Fast forward to now. Now I'm married with a kid, and I will not move back into my parents' basement. But it was, that was an epiphany. And then the other thing, I think I came in a little naive. Like we were working in family funds, private equity, and M&A, and that's definitely a major league sport. But starting a business it's like MLB to NFL. It's sure they're both major league sports, but they are totally different games.
Right, and I mean, So like you had that kind of epiphany, like you said, was that, we're huge on networking, and obviously that's how we met and everything. We wanted to reach out. I think I knew somebody that worked labor jobs, that had met you through that or something like that, over at Western Michigan. And then I was like, yeah, I'm going to reach out to that guy, because we have, parallel interests in business and everything. And with that being said, while you were still on, the other side of the game, I guess, if you will, as working for those companies, if you didn't have those conversations with the business owners, did you still have kind of like that entrepreneurial, mindset in a way, or was it from networking and understanding what the process is like and what it can, what the payout, not necessarily cash wise, but what the everything, like the value that you can bring and all that stuff? Like, did those conversations have a huge factor into you making that decision to go for it?
Yeah, they definitely did. Like I said, I was always an idea person. But as you guys know, through starting Gas Money, an idea is one thing. Building a business is a whole different animal. And so I got to I don't know if cheat's the right word, but after hearing like, okay, you file the paperwork to become a company. When you talk to somebody that's been through it, they're like, oh, it's easy. Just go here, 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 and file your company. If you don't have those little tidbits, it seems like a really daunting task. So I think that really helped me realize, one, I can call people for help when I get into pinches, but two, it's certainly not easy starting a business, but there's people that have been there, done that, and having them in your Rolodex that you can just call is huge. And then with my auto finance contacts, that's all great, and I have a ton of great friends out of that. It's useful in terms of, hey, what are good business decisions? We're at this point, we're having this problem. How do we get there? But I underestimated the pivot between totally switching industries. So in auto finance, I always say I'm 1 degree from anybody I need to know. Like, I might not know the person that I need to call, but I could call a buddy who knows that person and can make an intro. I came into a whole different industry where I didn't have contacts. And so from a scaling and growth standpoint, looking back, I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, if you're in an industry where you know everybody, it's pretty easy to get those first client feedback before you build a product. Hey, here's what I'm thinking of building. What should I consider? Hey, will you be my first client? Will you sign a contract so I can go get funding from the bank or whatever? Like, you kind of breeze over that when you switch industries. And now looking back, you're like, well, we made it, and I'm glad that we did. But it's a lot more challenging if you don't have the right connections to make it go faster.
Exactly. And one thing we found too is you never know where a certain connection will go. Like, you'll meet somebody, whether it's like out at a bar or somebody, just some random interaction you have with somebody where you get their contacts. And then whether it's a couple months or a couple of years later, that person turns out to be helping you a lot more than you originally thought they were. And I guess that's one thing that I never realized about business until Austin and I actually got into Gas Money and launched our platform. Is connections are, in my opinion, one of the biggest assets that you can have for your company. And I think that's what you're kind of going at too. Like, without the proper connections, like, it's so much harder to either get investors or get advice about a certain topic. People are really the best asset, especially in the world of entrepreneurship. And that's another thing we wanted to talk to you about. Like, now that you have your company very well established, you guys are on the pathway to continue growing very rapidly. Soon, hopefully 5-10 years, be a huge company that's nationwide. Are you still actively making the effort to connect, like, any chance you get, or do you have a pretty good network built up now?
So both. So I think one of the cool things that you hit on is the ripple effect from every person you meet. And that's been one of the most fulfilling things about this whole labor thing, whether it's our corporate team, whether it's the investors that I've gotten to meet through the journey. I've gotten to know a lot of the workers. They're awesome. A lot of clients. You meet so many cool people through it. I think you're looking at it right. You never know where it can go. And so, like, our investors were really important, and this will be important for you guys on your next steps too. We met a handful of our first investors that introduced us to the next ones, and not that they all came in, but there's the ripple effect too, where you meet the right person, they're rolling in the same circles of people that are like-minded, interested in investing and stuff. So that was huge for us. And you get, like, the people that are able to invest in startups, there are flukes from time to time, but these people know what they're doing. They build companies. They're great resources. They don't want to be involved in the day-to-day, but they love helping the us's of the world that are out there to build what they've been able to build. So that's been super rewarding, and their contacts are big. And then for us, like, we're going after businesses. I can make 100 cold calls in a day, but it's a heck of a lot easier for our investor to introduce us to their buddy that owns some business that has a need for it. And so that's been really, really important as we scale as well.
Yeah, and I guess
So another
for the
thing-
investor space too, that's one thing. Like, I remember you mentioned that when you're starting a business, when you're going to do the paperwork, people say, "Oh, it's easy," but there's really a lot to it. And obviously, investors are a whole different league. But we've had a couple connections that have gone through the investing rounds, including you. And after doing them, it seems like there's so much knowledge and experience that you gain. But from our point of view, and I guess for you, like, framing yourself back before you had gone for any investment rounds, before you knew anything about what it takes to pitch ideas to people, to get that fundraising that you need, like, how overwhelming was that, and what did you do to navigate those, like, uncertain areas in the investing sphere?
Yeah, so we had some investors that definitely helped me through that, whether it was they were already in or, hey, how do we structure this thing? Because they've seen it. Christian's dad is, he's been in the business world, entrepreneurial world for decades. And so when I told him, Christian isn't active in the business, he was super instrumental in getting it off the ground. He'll do whatever he can to help, but he's still running his business. And that first summer when it was getting serious, I called him. His name's Rick. He was a bodybuilder. He was like Mr. Grand Rapids, so I call him Thick Rick. It's like, Thick Rick, hey man, we need to raise some money. Do you know anything about this? And he's like, I don't, but you should talk to my buddy so-and-so. This is what he does. He's been in this industry forever. And then you talk to his buddy who's like, oh, here are a couple good options for you. And I know some people who might be interested. Here's going to be what they're looking for. So you need to start with a solid pitch deck that says where you're going to go, but that thing's going to iterate. It's going to tweak. And I think it's easy to get caught up in all the articles you read on Google about these huge, massive rounds and how it went so fast. And hats off to them. Good for you that it happened that quickly. But I don't know. I've probably pitched a couple hundred investors by this point, and you get a little better each time and you help tweak it. Then it comes into round structuring, and there's just a lot to it. But you're never going to make any progress if you don't take the first step into calling somebody that might know somebody, or sitting down with somebody that knows it, that is willing to give you the time to say, hey, I'm not the right investor for this, but here are a few people that are, and here's how they're going to think that it should be structured. So that kind of goes back to your networking points from earlier. Just taking the first step, having the sit downs, being open to feedback, it'll help work its way out. And then there's really good resources online too. Like, so many companies are fundraising now that you can learn a lot about how to structure the rounds. But at the end of the day, it takes that first step to, hey, here's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for X dollars at this valuation. Here's what we're going to do with the money. Point me in the right direction. And I haven't had any success pitching VCs, like just submit my pitch deck. It's always been through knowing somebody or having people introduce me to somebody that might be interested.
Yeah, which is huge in the connection, sphere, because when somebody that they know is talking about you, it's a lot more comfortable that person knows this person, so they're trusting that they're not just feeding them bullshit. And I think that's huge. So you mentioned probably 30-40 minutes ago, but about the board that you've built, and we've always been so curious, and we're actually like kind of in the planning of figuring out who to put on the board and how to even build that. But did that just come along the way through the investors, through the other connections that you've had, through the mentors, or did you actually strategically kind of plan that out?
A little bit of both. So we had a rough idea, and I think that's another point about building a business, is you've got the idea of how things are going to play out and how they actually play out. So we had a rough idea that it was going to be a portion founders, a portion investors, and a portion industry experts to help guide us, but it's morphed over time. And really what it comes down to is, if somebody's going to write you a check that is going to get you to the next side of the next phase of your growth, and they say, but if I'm going to give you this check, I'm going to need to be on the board, that's a decision you have to make. I think it really depends on the what you want out of the board, because if you're going to run a board right and you're going to get the value that you want out of it, it's a lot of work. It's not just a quarterly couple-hour meeting. It's keeping them informed, getting their feedback, making sure they understand what's going well, what isn't going well. So the board conversation is an interesting one because there's a ton of value in it, but it's not something that you just set up and the value comes to you. You really have to work to make sure that you're like, the board's always willing to help. They wouldn't be on your board without it. But if they don't have all the information, they can't make good decisions to help guide you in the company to get to where you need to go.
Exactly. And it helps so much to have that support. And that's what Austin and I are looking for our next step, is kind of creating that board. And one thing that comes along with making a board is kind of creating that company culture. And from your experience, has there been certain either principles or values that you've kind of used to either form like camaraderie with your board or get them kind of on the same page? Like what's the company culture behind LABR, and how have you used that to kind of accelerate what your guys' mission is?
Yeah, so I took probably a different route than a lot of founders do on culture, saying, like, I feel like a lot of companies, they set up, they get their mission, vision, values, all that fun stuff. And while we had a rough idea of that, at the end of the day, your people build the culture, in my opinion. So we hired really quickly out of the gate. We've had turnover, all that fun stuff. But at the end of the day, we're however many years into this, and the culture kind of emerges from the people that are the right fits. And that's my opinion on it. That's not like right or wrong. And so the trends that have continuously kept up for us, we have a lot of competitive people that just like to win. I mean, they're not at a startup because it's not the most stable company in the world to work for. You're not going to get the highest entry-level paycheck. You just get competitors that are betting on themselves and work in a good team environment. So we have a lot of ex-college athletes and stuff that kind of just happen by chance. I think a big one for us is empathy, both for forgiving our own teammates when we make mistakes. We're going a million miles an hour, and not all the answers are known yet. I mean, if the answers were known, somebody else would have built this company a long time ago. So we have to be empathetic when our own team makes mistakes, our workers make mistakes, life happens. We get that. Clients, we got to understand what it's like to be in their shoes, because back to the landscaping example, if we're 2 hours late and they hold up a crew that they're paying the other 3 people, $20 an hour or whatever, like, we have to be empathetic and understanding. So that's been a trend that has emerged. I think just finding a way to get the job done when it doesn't seem like it's possible, that's been a big one that's emerged. And the last one is, it's work. Nobody's doing this for charity, but we like to have fun when we can. We celebrate the wins as they come. We reflect on the losses, but I want it to be a fun place to work where you're not dragging yourself out of bed. Not that those days don't happen. I mean, we're building a business here, but overall, I think we have a team that likes to have fun. We joke around, but we know we're going to find a way to get it done.
Yeah, and that's huge. I think at any startup, you got to be able to motivate your people and actually have people too that motivate you as well. You can't just be the only person in the driver's seat. You got to let the other people, try it too. And I think the main thing, this is kind of a loaded question, but we talked a little bit about, when you're an entrepreneur, when you're having, small success, sometimes bigger successes along the way, you start to really build up these large goals and a large vision in the end that hopefully you share that with your team and with the workers and everything like that, because there's always going to be something, with growth, you can always do better. You can always build the company better in a different way. You can always add new services. You can always, like with you guys, expand to residential services and whatnot. But I don't know if you can put it into as simple terms as possible, but your vision for LABR, it's probably changed along the way, I'm sure. And if you can elaborate on that, and then I guess get up to the current main vision of what you guys have for LABR for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a few things on that. So I can tell you where the vision is and where I expect us to be in 5-10 years. I think the big thing for me, and as you guys are navigating your growth too, I'm a big picture guy, and I love thinking about what could be. And I realized last year, all this stuff that could be is great, but it's all wasted effort, because if that's step 100 and we don't make it to step 6, none of it matters. So the challenge for me and the discipline has come in. Yeah, that's all great. Nothing matters until we get from step 5 to 6, and then 6 to 7, then 7 to 8. So we don't lose sight of the vision. And frankly, I don't think that's changed a whole lot, the end goal for us. How we get there absolutely has. So 10 years from now, beyond the geographic footprint of having general labor, where I'd like to be is a national company, and then also have verticals on it. So verticals, one could be residential, but I'm thinking, CDL truck drivers or, coaches or tutors. There's so many, all our app does connect supply, demand, and scheduling, right? So you got your clients on one side, your providers on the other. The app doesn't care if it's general labor or if it's rocket scientists. So where can we expand horizontally beyond the geographic? That's kind of the vision for it. And then what I'd love to do, because mentors have been such a big influential part of my career, and we could never be the mentor for all these people, but I would love to be able to be a source of truth or a resume for these workers. So Robert's an accounting major, entrepreneurship major at Florida State. You're a bad example because you already started a company, but say you want to type organization. Well, I know that Robert's worked 50 jobs. He's never been late one time. He has a 5-star rating. How can I put Robert into where he wants to go? Like, if you want to be the best general laborer ever, how do we help get you there? If you want to be the president, well, that's a bad example. I don't know how to be president. I never want to know how to do that. But if you want to be a financial analyst at Ally Financial, like I was, how do we help you build the skill sets, introduce you to the right people so that you can get placed there after college, knowing that you're just doing this as a stopgap to get to the next point of your career? So that's something I'm passionate about, and we'll get to eventually. And it's been kind of cool. So 2021 was our first year where we had workers on the app. I had a few people call me this past spring saying, hey, I want to get into sales. Do you know anybody? And unfortunately, I wasn't able to get them placed, but it was pretty cool. It's like, hey, we work together. You remember that? Like, how do we help them? They helped us, and hopefully we helped them a little in the first part. How do we get them to that next point in their career? And I think that's going to be really rewarding and a big piece of our business once we have enough years under our belt that we actually can pull that off.
Definitely. And I think at the end of the day, obviously the main goal of any business is to generate revenue, make money, and continue building that business. But even more importantly, it's always about making that positive change like you were talking about. And that's kind of where we're going to, is we want to provide as many experiences for our workers as possible, enable them to make money, which you're doing a great job of on your end. We're working on it on our end. And overall, like, one of the biggest things I think I've taken from business is there's going to be times where you fail. And I'm sure you have a huge list of times where you've went one way, it didn't work out, and then you had to kind of adapt and work through that. So I guess one last major question, like, what is your perspective on failure? How has that kind of changed as you've went into entrepreneurship and as you've experienced things not going your way and kind of having to navigate those challenges instead of allowing them to set you back or get you down?
Yeah, well, the failures will teach you quicker than any of the successes. That's for sure. And I think it's just part of the game. Like, you're building a business, you're going to mess up. I think it comes down to, and actually my first boss out of college told me this. He's like, I want you to make mistakes. I don't want to ever see a repeat mistake or a stupid mistake. So I think that really holds true with entrepreneurship. The stakes can be a little bit higher. But the failures, you look back, like I look back on our first couple of years and I'm like, well, in the spreadsheet versus the app is a perfect example. Now, that wasn't do or die, and we've made way worse mistakes in that sense. But I think it all comes down to iterating, learning from it, and then doing everything you can to not make dumb mistakes. But mistakes are going to happen. Like I said earlier, if somebody already knew how to build this business, it'd be built and somebody would be doing it. It's impossible to avoid, but it's just learning from them, waking up the next day, brushing it off, moving on. And then I think the other big thing is, as your team scales and you have more employees relying on you and being the one that's, setting the vision and making sure everything is on track to pulling that off, is just being open with the team. Like, hey, we really messed up here. That one was my fault. Had I had another shot, here's what I would have done. And then making sure that they're on board, comfortable, feel like they're empowered to do their job. The other big piece, it's not just me learning from my mistakes. It's how do we integrate that in the culture so that we all know that mistakes are fine. We're going to learn from them and move on. And then when we do make a big enough one that it calls for a town hall or something, just being open with them. Like, employees have been so cool. We've been through a lot of great things, a lot of bad things. Employees have been super receptive as long as they know what's going on. But if they're wondering and getting in their own head about, well, what does that mean for me that's when you get in trouble. So as hard as it is to just bite the bullet, it's a lot easier to bite the bullet and have your team on board than just letting it stew there forever and they're wondering what the heck is going on.
Exactly. And I guess one more question to wrap it up. The Inside Gas Money podcast, our main goal is just empowering young adults, giving them for advice about entrepreneurship and kind of helping them navigate this very new and rapidly changing world. So this is a tough question, probably hardest question of the podcast, but if you could narrow down one piece of advice to young adults who are either just graduating college and going into the career, looking to start a business, but not really sure if it's worth the risk, not sure where to go. What would that piece of advice be to those young adults who are looking to get into entrepreneurship?
Well, I think this goes for all business, and it's within reason, just say yes. So going back a little bit on my career as an auto finance, I ended up in healthcare IT outsourcing, and then I ended up in auto finance in Sacramento, California. And a lot of my buddies would tell me, why are you working that much for your salary? And you're not going to get it on your first one. But you know what? The skills that I made when I was making my base level salary, I made up when I got the next job. And then the skills, like I was going above and beyond. There's going to be stuff that's going to be uncomfortable when people ask you to do it. There's going to be long hours. But I look back now and I'm so glad that I did, because that's going to stretch you. And maybe you don't get the money right away, but your resume and your experience is going to be so much stronger. And then you fast forward into starting a business. It's like, holy crap, I had no idea how to do any of this. You look at the skill set now, you know how to do it. It's not like it ever gets erased. Like it's just constantly growing, and step out of your comfort zone. It's like, yeah, I remember. So when I was 24, I had a team of 500 people. I looked like I was a call center rep and I was running a call center. And I got a call from Tommy, who I mentioned, who's on our board now. She's like, hey, you're going to take over operations on Monday. It was a Friday. And I go, well, Tommy, that's great, but I got a team of 3 and I have no idea how to manage a large team. And she goes, well, that's what I'm here for. We'll get through it together. And the first 2 months, I'm surprised I'm not bald. Like I had no idea what I was doing. And I tried to keep my composure in front of everybody. And then I just go home and I'm like, what the heck's going on? I go into my boss's office. I was like, Dave, this is too much, man. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm working crazy hours. I don't feel like I'm being effective. And he starts laughing. He goes, I was wondering when you were going to come in here and say that. And the whole point is you got to stretch yourself, get out of your comfort zone. The money will come if you find something that you're good at and you continue to grow and develop. But you got to stretch yourself, especially early. And using that IT healthcare step, so glad that I did it. That probably wasn't the career for me, but I learned a ton. And then I went back to auto finance, which I loved. And then I went in and gained experience to let me start LABR. So all the chapters are worth it in the long run. Even if you hate it, it's like, cool. Now I know I'm young and I hated that and I never want to do it again. Like I ran the service desk, so 24/7 coverage of doctors and nurses not getting into their computers, and they call the service desk. There's no time off, like holiday weekends. You better be ready for your phone to blow up. And it's like, I don't want that in my life. And when else would I have known that if I didn't try it that early? And it's not something you'd think of when you saw some big title job until you actually live it. And you're like, you know what? I don't mind working a lot of hours, but I don't want to be working Christmas every year, or whatever your personal preference is. So I'd say yes, get the experience, find what you like, find where it intersects, where you're good at it and you like it, then you figured it out. But if you have one job your whole life, you're never going to figure that out. Or it's going to be when you're 55 years old and it's too late.
I think that was great advice and great podcast, by the way, too. I think we're over an hour and a half now. So awesome conversation. And before we go, just any shout outs for how people can get a hold of you if they had questions, maybe like a LinkedIn or LABR's website. Also the LABR app. Feel free to give any shout outs that you want.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. Shoot me a message, and then don't fault me if I don't get back to you. I'm horrible at checking the messages, but like once a month I go and I just clear that out.
Awesome. Perfect.
And then, yeah, anybody looking for extra money on the side, LABR app is in Google Play Store and iOS or Apple App Store. And then we've got form fills on our website, all that fun stuff. So anybody looking for some extra cash that wouldn't interfere with gas money and or anybody who might have a need on the business side, we're growing, we're bringing on new clients and always looking to meet cool people.
Awesome. And just to clarify, it's labr.com. So that's how it's spelled. It's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
normal labor.
Going back to what we talked about earlier, I always think labor, get a lot of labbers, and how do you pronounce that? So labor, LABR.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thanks
Awesome.
again for hopping on. It's been a pleasure talking. And as we always say at the end of our podcast, go get that gas.
Go get
money.
that gas money.